So I have to keep up with these videos. I feel it necessary to do so. This whole blog thing I have going on just seems like it's in my blood now. It feels like I just can't give it up. It feels like I just have to do it. Um, anyway, that being said, I haven't made a video in a long time, but I did squeeze out a blog post. And there's lots to say. I mean, there's tons to actually say about pretty much everything that's been going on in the news when it comes to atheism or religion or secularism, what's going on in Canada, what's going on in the Middle East, blah, blah, blah. I mean, religion does have a role to play in the world. I mean, like I keep saying, 84% of the world is religious. I mean, that's got to stand for something. Um, I've been, while I haven't made a video and while I've been kind of writing and making my Spiralvent Facebook page notes, I've been kind of, going back and forth on some core issues. I mean, for instance, like what is the difference between, reforming Islam and apostasy? I mean, simple questions on the surface, I guess, but what does that mean? What are the logistics of doing something like that, or choosing one and kind of going with it? I mean, there's a lot of kind of convoluted issues as well. I mean, in France, Macron is kind of suggesting that the state meddle in the affairs of religion in France. I mean, of all places. I mean, we kind of have a smaller version of it in Quebec, I guess. But in France, of all places, I mean, you're thinking about like where's the separation of religion and state, or religion and government? Where is that line being drawn? Who's funding what? Like, I mean, are we talking about the French public funding Islam or funding Islamic institutions? I mean, you think about Majid Nawaz's Quilliam Foundation, and as Faisal Said Al Mutar pointed out on the Rubin Report a few months ago, Quilliam, as much as it seems very, I don't know how you would say it. Do you even say that's a secular organization? Like what? Like, I mean, how? What is secularism? Blah blah blah. But oops, that slipped. But yeah, I mean, Quilliam is a religious organization after all. I mean, who funds these things? Like, I mean, anyway, we have a medley of issues going on in Canada as well. I mean, on a very small scale, the Halton Catholic School Board has this whole issue about funding charities that oppose religious teachings that that dictate against women's rights, abortion rights, gay rights, things like that. On the other hand, you have this summer jobs program attestation thing going on with supporting, with religious organizations having to say that they support a woman's right to choose when it comes to abortion, and I'm sure there's some gay issues in the mix as well. There's always gay issues in the mix. So I mean, there's all these little funding issues happening in Canada. I don't think people take I have a special interest blog, so I mean these things do pop at me, but I mean I don't think people are too worried about it. I mean, there was even one Christian organization that was saying the attestation, for the summer jobs training program in Canada, was sort of a gateway to basically eliminating charitable status. Not charitable status, although that is an upcoming issue as well. There's a Senate committee based on re-evaluating what is happening with charitable causes in Canada and the funding they get from government. A lot of them don't have programs that deal with social issues. They just simply run on the advancement of religious teachings or religious doctrine or religion in general. But they don't really have any quote unquote charitable programs. They don't run soup kitchens, etc., etc. Anyway, my point being is, I mean, I guess maybe that is the same issue. That is the same issue. Sorry. So I mean, maybe the Christian organization was maybe there was some truth to it. I posted it on Spiralvent, so God save me on that one. But um, yeah, there's all these little funding issues when it comes to religion and what secularism means and how much of a role government has to, like, I mean, how much can government intrude on religious causes, and how much can religion intrude in government? I mean, in the U.S., our neighbor to the south, there's a reiteration of the religious office in the White House, and I think under Trump, because he loves his Christian base so much, I think he's definitely going to play. He's definitely going to play out this thing as an evangelical Christian kind of bent, in terms of social services and how those get funneled or funded through religion, and what that means in terms of preaching to clients, or preaching to, or denying service to certain groups or certain individuals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The I mean, it was kind of scary that White House, in that speech where he announced the new office. It was kind of scary, the some of the wording he used in terms of the United States. Not scary in the sense that I'm panicked, but scary in the sense that he's talking about things that are, I mean, kind of very contrary to the founding fathers, and where they were coming from. I mean, the nation was founded on prayer, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, kind of disturbing, right? But I think he definitely knows. I definitely knows who he knows who's supporting him, and I think, yeah, I think the evangelical Christian base is really coming up the rear on that one. Interestingly enough, I looked up a Wikipedia article about the Office of Religious Freedom in Canada, and which is now defunct. It's been gotten rid of. Um, but yeah, the officer, the leading, I don't know what you would call him, the I forget, but the leading guy in that office was Andrew Bennett, and he was kind of definitely had a Catholic bias, et cetera, et cetera. And there were issues surrounding secular groups that were never consulted in terms of the creation of the office. And so yeah, like you know, there's these like sort of rubber hits the road kind of issues with religion and where this all plays along, which brings up another issue as well. I have a feeling the mic is going to be way off on this because I'm speaking kind of quietly, and for some reason the mic on this camera is really weird as well. But the other issue is when these issues come up in Parliament, or when they come up in the Senate, or when they come up in constitutional challenges, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's very interesting how the news. I don't want to be too much of a critic because I should be reading more news. I really should be. But I mean, I do read a lot of mainstream media, the Atlantic, the Star, the Golden Mail, National Post, et cetera, et cetera. It's amazing how news usually leaves out the actual doctrine, or the actual teachings of 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 religion, like the stuff that's in the Bible, the stuff that religion's made of. Um, the words in the Bible, the words in the Quran, the words in the Gita, or the whatever you call it. I mean, or in the Torah, or the Talmud, or the Hadith, or whatever. Like, I mean, there seems to be like this, almost like this blind spot. And I'm not saying that the news should be focusing on doctrine and dogma, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe it's out of the scope. Maybe it's an understatement. Maybe it's something we already know, right? But I mean, these things, when they come up for challenges in court or wherever else, um, I think it's very interesting that the arguments that religionists use. I don't want to say religionists because it's kind of deflating the point I want to make, but the point being is like. Even different religions, like say when it comes to blasphemy, for instance, can be held accountable in terms of blasphemous libel because they're mutually exclusive. Now, there's a certain point where you start talking about moderates and how they kind of evaporate when it comes to differences in their religions, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, even at that point, what are you saying? If you're moderate, like, what are you? All these little tiny details, right? Like, what are you talking about? Like, so what? There's like swaths of your holy books that you're just kind of ignoring. Like, we don't believe that anymore. Like, who cares? So there's tons to say about the way people think about religion in a way that leaves a lot of like uncharted territory. But anyway, I'm confident that these issues, when it comes to dogma, when it comes to, when it comes to policy, even government policy, say for instance the Catholic Church and their ban against contraceptives. I mean, forget unwanted pregnancies and you know, yeah. What about the transfer of Zika virus from one sexual partner to the next? I mean, these issues just get like really, they're contemporary issues. They're very relevant. It's a public health issue, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, you know, these issues do get addressed, but I feel like they kind of get maybe covered over a bit, and dogma and doctrine is kind of left to be kind of unaccountable or irresponsible, not irresponsible, but held to no responsibility for the policy that they inspire. Um, but yeah, so I feel like these things don't really come up, and like but they are there, and they do get addressed in on whatever level. Um, I mean, France is an interesting one. I mean, I don't know how that's going to play out. I mean, federally funded Islam in France, weird. Um, anyway, so there's much more to talk about, and I think I want to go to my Facebook page and see what I've been keeping notes on. Um, the wind has just been fucking crazy. You wouldn't believe in Toronto today, like just crazy. Um, so yeah, I guess maybe the pedophile stuff that goes on in the Catholic Church. I mean, I've read stories, although they're not as pronounced, but I've read stories of Jewish communities and Islamic communities that have similar problems when it comes to child abuse, and maybe not just sexual abuse, but physical abuse, etc., etc. But the Catholic Church seems to be very prominent, and they seem to have a history of covering things up. Um, I mean, what I want to say is like there's definitely a structural. I don't know how ingrained this structural flaw is in the institutions of Catholicism or whatever, but there's definitely some sort of covering up that happens, and it happens not just in terms of the perpetrator. It happens on an official level, if that makes sense. It happens with other people in the church who may not have directly contributed to pedophilia or charges of child molestation, blah blah blah. And again, you look at doctrine, and you see where the celibacy thing kind of gets this revered status. I'm kind of focusing on Catholicism here, but you know, but this celibacy thing, and then this structural kind of nature of of trying to cover up injustices made by what should be authority figures in the community, and how the communities. I mean, this is kind of going to the Hasidic Jew thing in New York, but the way they sort of, these authority figures have to be protected at all costs, because they're men of God, blah blah blah. So yeah, I'm not saying that there's a policy in the Catholic Church saying that pedophiles must be protected, but there's a certain structural element to all of this that kind of seems obvious. Um, and I think it's a very true one. Um, but yeah, and I think you could trace it anyway. So my last note was basically saying, how far removed can you put God? You know, how far removed can you place God in any of this? Like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Um, like it just, yeah, it's kind of an open-ended question. I mean, there's supposed to be some sort of wave of apology that's supposed to be going down, but I don't know how. I don't know how. I don't know how. I don't know how much change that's going to bring about. I don't know how effectual it's going to be, because, like, in one of my notes, I basically said that uh, you know, oh, I forget what I said. I said that you think that it would influence some sort of change within the Catholic Church itself, or within other institutions that kind of have these issues, but you doubt that it will. Um, and even if there are, I mean, the Catholic Church has been, and other religious institutions. I mean, Islam is kind of, I'm focusing on Islam now, but slow to change. I mean, even slower than government. You know what I mean? You know, uh, just really, really slow and stubborn as hell. I mean, Galileo was pardoned in 1994, I think it was. I mean, I could be totally off about that, but I mean, anyway. Yeah, that's I know it's kind of an open-ended video. I just had to get something out today because I feel like I've been building up all this stuff to say and I haven't said it. Um, yeah, I can't really think of anything else. Yeah, but I guess maybe the point to sum everything up is I don't think religion is removed from government or public life or from community life or from social life. I think it's not like we're living in some totalitarian religious nut job state or anything like that. In Canada anyway. But I don't think you have to look very far, considering that the world is the Earth is a very small place. To see where these things just like directly hit. Uh, where they run up against like things like employment. They run up against things like women's rights or human rights, or they run up against things like freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of conscience. I'm not saying that there is one way to think and there will always be disagreements. I mean, that's sort of the spirit of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, etc., etc. But I mean, I don't think it's one of those things that we can completely forget and think, oh, no relation to anything really. I just want to reiterate that I do have vested interest, but I'd like to reiterate the relevance of atheism, secularism, religiosity, etc., etc., the whole bag of these issues. I don't think it's without concern. I don't think it's without a genuine concern for the way people live their lives, etc., etc. Um, and on a going out sort of note, I still am confused as to what moderates actually say when they say their things. Like I don't know. Like I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But I have, and this is kind of unofficial, so don't quote me on this. But I have noticed that moderates tend to veer towards conservatism once you challenge their ideas. Um, that tends to always kind of happen. They kind of start going into this irrational, conservative kind of bent. It's kind of this defensive thing, but that's a whole issue about like goes back to like maybe what Sarah Hayter and Majid Nawaz are probably trying to do on different ends of the spectrum in terms of instilling doubt or reform or whatever. I mean, I have to look into as well. Uh, but yeah, that tends to kind of happen. Anyway, that's all for now. Bye.